My name is Anthony Lara, and for scenario two, we will be talking about the Tyree Nichols incident. So first, I'll start off with a brief timeline of what happened. So around 8:30 p.m., Tyree was pulled over for reckless driving. At about 8:35 p.m., he was manhandled out of his car by three officers, and they verbally assaulted him, they tased him, and they pepper sprayed him. All this led to him running away from the officers as he was scared. At around 8:33 p.m., one of the officers caught up to him and they detained him, tackled him on the ground. And from 8:34 p.m. to 8:37 p.m., he was kicked, beaten by a baton, and he was punched and pepper sprayed by multiple officers. So now you might be asking, are these actions justified? And the answer is no. There's zero legal justification for the amount of force and aggression that the officers used on Tyree from the start. Yes, officers are allowed to use the amount of force they feel was necessary to keep them safe, but in no doubt about was that force that they used justified by Tyrese's actions and his demeanor. Yes, he did resist and he was squirming from officers and he wasn't compliant all the way, but he was not threatening these officers and not putting their life at risk. The beating, unnecessary beating, does not justify to someone squirming on the ground and not letting you, not taking your orders of laying down on the ground flat. It just doesn't justify it itself. So now we're going to talk about the police department of Memphis. You may be saying that from seeing the video, you may think that it's just that these officers were unprofessional and that it's just them. But the reality is that the police department of Memphis has its questions. You can tell off the bat that the department is unprofessional and it has poor ethics and poor morals, which promotes a horrible culture and a culture that's unprofessional and that would tolerate this type of behavior. Another thing I found during outside research was that the Memphis Police Department were down 1,938 officers from their goal of 2,300 officers. And in the month of February, in a week alone in February, they lost 22 officers. So this led Memphis to being desperate in recruiting and hiring more officers. So in efforts to hire more officers, the department changed the requirements and standards to join. So the first thing they did was they eased off on the PAT, but they also softened restrictions by applicants with criminal convictions, which raises a huge red flag. So we'll move on to the Scorpion unit. And the Scorpion unit stands for Street Crime Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhood. And the officers we see in the video that were that pulled over and that were interacting with uh Tyree Nichols, they were a part of the Scorpion unit. And there's a unit of four teams who are patrolling high crime hotspots throughout the city. And this unit became very controversial for how officers would perform and the use of force they would perform. And in January 31st, the department actually revealed that four out of those five officers that were involved in the incident of Tyree Nichols, they received past discipline from the department because they failed to properly file paperwork for the use of force, which would be no surprise and why we would see how the levels they went to in this situation and how unnecessary and poor it was. So if I was chief of the Memphis Police Department, what would I do? What would my response be? So first thing I would do would all officers who laid a hand on Nichols would be terminated. We would not tolerate that type of behavior or that type of actions by the police department. And those who didn't hold the officers accountable and were just viewing and being bystanders, they would be eliminated from patrol permanently in Memphis PD. And we would try to figure out a different position for them outside of patrol and outside of dealing with people on the streets. For the Scorpion unit, of course, you would dismantle it. It's important to, as a chief, to work with closing the barrier with the community, not making it larger. And it's no doubt about it that the community wants nothing to do with the Scorpion unit, nor would they feel that the unit is safe and should be patrolling on their streets. So for that case, we would dismantle it. And lastly, I would have to buff and strengthen the hiring process. So the PAT, I wouldn't be too much worried about it, but I would look at it, see if it's reasonable or if it should be improved. But the part is we would eliminate um having applicants with criminal convictions. That would be a huge no and a huge red flag that we wouldn't step away from and have to buff the hiring process. And that's how I would deal with the scenario. But I wouldn't let Tyree Nichols or any individual who was killed to death for no justified reason, their name go to vain. And that's what I would do in this situation.